Okay, the date is July 24th, 1991. The place, a sun-baked Greek island, Kos, specifically a pretty remote village called Iraklis.
And this location became the center of a case that, well, it's stretched over 3 decades now. So many headlines, so much uncertainty. It's really become symbolic of these agonizing missing person cases.
We are talking, of course, about the disappearance of Ben Needham. He was only 21 months old, an English toddler staying with his grandparents.
And he just vanished, gone. When the initial searches, which were pretty frantic, turned up nothing, the immediate assumption, certainly for the family and for the media too, was kidnapping. A terrifying thought.
It really all circles back to one spot, doesn't it? This simple farmhouse, quite isolated on a hillside.
It does. So this deep dive is for you listening. We're going to dig into the mountain of sources this case has generated over 30 years. We'll follow the path from what looked like a missing person case, lots of potential sightings, right through to complex forensic digs.
Our mission here is to really focus on the crucial bits of evidence, the things that made investigators totally shift their thinking, moving away from abduction towards a really heartbreaking accident scenario. Okay, let's unpack this.
Right. So to get the picture, you need to understand the setting. Ben was with his grandparents, Eddie and Christine Needham. They were doing up this old farmhouse, pretty remote spot near Coast Town.
A renovation project.
Exactly. And Ben's mom, she was working that day at a local hotel, so Ben's just playing like toddlers do, wandering in and out of the farmhouse, the grounds.
He was last seen around 2:40 in the afternoon.
Yeah.
And then nothing. He just wasn't there anymore.
Yeah. Gone.
The first reaction, reading the sources, it sounds like, was just chaos and maybe a bit of denial. The family searched themselves first.
Which is totally understandable, isn't it? You think he's wandered off into the scrub, maybe? It's dry, rough terrain up there.
Or maybe his uncle, Stephen, who's a teenager. Maybe he'd put him on his moped for a quick ride.
Exactly. Those were the initial thoughts. But that family search, as natural as it was, well, it turned out to be the first kind of snag in the investigation.
How so?
Because when they finally did call the police, hours had passed. And the local Hellenic police, well, maybe it's a common thing with cases involving foreigners, their first instinct was to view the Needhams themselves with suspicion.
Ah, right. So they might have thought the family was involved somehow.
Potentially. Or at least they didn't rule it out immediately. And that suspicion, it really cost them.
Cost some critical time, you mean?
Absolutely critical time. That delay meant that alerting, the airports, the ferry docks, it was slow. Fatally slow, perhaps.
So if he had been abducted and taken off coast quickly.
Those first few hours were everything.
Yeah.
The whole investigation started on the back foot, really, playing catch-up.
But despite that delay, the search operation itself was massive, wasn't it? We're talking police, army.
Oh, huge. The Hellenic police, the Greek army, even the fire brigade, they were out there for 11 straight days, combing that hillside, that whole area.
11 days. And after all that, what was the official word?
Basically, nothing. Just more questions. There's this quite telling quote from Nikolaos Stachouris, who was the island's chief of police back then.
What did he say?
He said, "We now believe we have searched every possible part of that area and the boy is not there. It leaves us with a great mystery. We have no theories. We have no solutions."
Yeah, no theories, no solutions. Just gone.
What's fascinating here is that complete vacuum. After such a big search backed by the military, finding absolutely nothing, not even like a shoe or a piece of clothing.
It must have just fueled the family's worst fear.
Exactly. It basically cemented the abduction theory in their minds, and you can completely understand why. If he wasn't found there, he must have been taken.
And that lack of solid evidence, it just opened the floodgates for rumors, didn't it?
Totally. The family became convinced he was snatched, maybe for illegal adoption, maybe by, organized child traffickers, and the public response was intense.
How many sightings were reported?
The sources say over 300 alleged sightings came in, mostly in that first year or so, 91, 92. All over Greece, really.
And there were some really specific ones, weren't there? Cases that seemed, for a moment, like they might be him.
Oh, absolutely. Heartbreakingly so. Like in 1995 in Salonika, a private investigator was certain he'd found Ben living with a Romani family.
God, imagine the hope.
Right. But the Greek police investigated, and it turned out definitively to be another child. They had a birth certificate, everything. It wasn't Ben.
And there was another one later, in Rhodes.
Yeah, 1998. A young man known locally as the blonde one looked similar. They even managed to get a hair sample for DNA.
Yeah.
Negative again. Not Ben. Every single lead that pointed towards abduction just seemed to evaporate. Hit a dead end.
So it sounds like, while the family is holding on to this idea of abduction, which, let's face it, is maybe psychologically easier than the alternative.
It keeps hope alive, doesn't it? The idea he's out there somewhere.
Right. But the actual investigative sources, the police work, it was increasingly pointing towards something else entirely.
That's the counter-narrative you see building in the sources over time. Someone like Carol Sarler, writing for the Times newspaper back in 2007, she really questioned the abduction story.
What was her take?
She basically argued there was zero hard evidence for kidnapping or trafficking, no witnesses, nothing concrete. And she suggested that actually a lonely accident was far more likely.
A lonely accident.
Yeah, for a toddler unsupervised for maybe hours on this baking, remote, inhospitable hillside, as she put it. It's a brutal thought, but from an investigative standpoint, it started to seem more plausible than these elaborate abduction theories.
The weight of that difference is huge, isn't it? Believing your child is alive somewhere versus believing they died alone, maybe just yards from where you were looking.
It's immense, and it probably explains why the family resisted the accident theory for so long. It fueled the search for Ben alive.
Meanwhile, the police, particularly the UK police who got more involved, were trying anything they could think of.
Anything, including new tech, which brings up that interesting little side note.
The EFIT software.
Yeah, South Yorkshire Police. Back in 1992, they used EFIT software, electronic facial identification technique, to create an image of what Ben might look like aged up at age 3.
And that was pretty new back then.
Groundbreaking, apparently. Thought to be one of the very first times EFIT was used not just to identify someone seen recently, but to age a missing person's image. Shows they were still treating him as potentially alive,
Right.
Trying to keep the search active.
But the massive shift, the thing that really changed the whole direction of the official investigation, that didn't come until much, much later.
Yeah, decades later, over 20 years, in fact.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
2012, South Yorkshire Police suddenly announced a totally new line of inquiry, a dark one.
They said they believed Ben had been accidentally killed and then buried under rubble by an excavator driver working near the farmhouse.
Wow, where did that come from after all this time?
It seems it came from intelligence reports, not forensics at first. The basic theory was digger working nearby, tragic accident, driver panics, uses the digger to cover Ben's body with building waste from the renovation.
And that theory immediately led to major action on the ground.
Oh, yeah. Big forensic operations.
Yeah.
The first one kicked off in October 2012. We're talking UK police teams flying out to coasts.
With serious kit.
The works! Geophysical survey gear like ground-penetrating radar, forensic archaeologists, specialist search dogs, the HRD dogs, human remains detection dogs, all focused on that area around the farmhouse.
And they had something specific they were looking for.
They did. They actually said publicly they were hoping to find a specific toy car, a little dinky toy car. They called it key to finding out what happened.
The idea being, if he was buried accidentally, the toy might be with him.
Precisely. But that 2012 search, it drew a blank. Completely. No human remains, no sign of the toy car, nothing.
So the first attempt to really prove the accident theory on site failed, which left things hanging for another few years.
4 more years of ambiguity, yeah.
What changed? What made them go back for a second, even bigger dig?
The trigger for the second search in September 2016 was a witness. Someone came forward with, well, potentially devastating information.
Okay.
They claimed that Konstantinos Barkas, who was the actual digger operator working there back in '91, the man suspected in this accident theory, had died recently. But before he died,
He confessed.
he'd apparently confessed to a relative that, yes, he had accidentally hit Ben with his digger, and that he had hidden the body in the building waste.
Deathbed confession. That's powerful. But it's still secondhand information about someone who's deceased,
Yeah.
right? How much could they rely on that?
Well, that's the crucial point for you, the listener, to think about. The police intelligence clearly decided this confession, even though secondhand, was the most credible explanation for why Ben had never been found. It seemed to fit the facts, or the lack of them.
So they prioritized it over everything else.
It seems so. It prompted that second huge excavation. And they focused on a slightly different patch of ground this time, based on details from that witness account.
And that 2016 dig, that was the one where they moved mountains of earth.
Literally, over 800 tons of soil and rubble were excavated and sifted. It was enormous.
And they still didn't find Ben's remains.
No remains. But they found the toy car,
The dinky car.
a small yellow dinky car, and another item too. Both were shown to the family, who confirmed they were Ben's. And crucially, they could be dated to that summer, 1991.
Found in the spot suggested by the confession.
Exactly. For the police, finding those items, particularly the car they'd highlighted back in 2012, right there in that specific mound of earth. That was it. That was the confirmation they needed.
So the lead investigator made it official.
Detective Inspector John Cousins, yeah.
Huh.
He made a very clear public statement. He said, "It is my professional belief that Ben Needham died as a result of an accident near to the farmhouse where he was last seen playing."
And he linked it directly to the car.
He did. He added that finding the car and where it was found further adds to my belief that material was removed from the farmhouse on or shortly after the day that Ben disappeared. He was basically saying, the accident happened, the body was moved with this rubble, and this car proves it.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that's a huge statement. The police are essentially closing the book, saying we believe it was an accident, not an abduction, based on the confession and the location of the toy.
It was a massive call, a huge professional judgment. They were effectively siding with the circumstantial evidence over the family's long-held belief and, decades of fruitless searching for an abducted child. They drew a line under the abduction theory.
And for a while, it looked like forensic science was going to back them up completely. In 2017, there were reports of new forensic findings.
That's right. Police announced they'd found trace biological evidence on a fragment of a leather sandal also recovered nearby, and even more significantly, on soil found inside that yellow, dinky car.
Biological evidence, like blood.
That was the implication. Specifically, the report mentioned Professor Lorna Dawson's soil forensics team in the UK.
What did they find exactly?
They found what was described as a genetic profile indicative of human blood decomposition on that sandal fragment. D.I. Cousins publicly stated this discovery further strengthened the accident theory, the idea Ben was killed and buried right there, right then.
So, suggestive of injury at the site.
That seemed to be the implication. The presence of decomposing blood linked to items known to be Ben's found at the suspected burial site. It all seemed to fit.
Case closed then. A tragic accident finally confirmed.
It looked that way. The theory seemed solid. Intelligence led them there, circumstantial evidence, the car's location supported it, and now trace biological evidence seemed to seal it. But, well, there was one final, really complex twist, a forensic detail that just muddies the water. It's the detail that stops this case having a neat, tidy ending. Despite everything, the professional belief, the car's location, the signs of decomposition, it came out in November 2018, the analysis of the sample from inside the yellow, dinky toy car.
Yes.
The profile they found, while indicative of human blood decomposition, it was definitively not Ben's DNA.
Not Ben's. Wait, the blood evidence on the key item, the car they pinned so much on, wasn't his.
Correct. A monumental contradiction, just as you say.
But what does that even mean?
Well, it doesn't automatically disprove the accident theory. Ben could still have died there. But it throws a massive question mark over the specifics, doesn't it? Especially regarding that car.
Like who handled it last?
There.
Or when?
Exactly. The location points strongly to the accident site. But the DNA found on the key piece of evidence recovered from that site doesn't match the victim. It stops absolute scientific proof that Ben died right there with that car.
So what does this all mean? We've tracked this case from initial police suspicion falling on the family through decades fueled by abduction fears and sightings.
Then a major pivot to this strong official belief in an accident, seemingly confirmed by finding the toy car near where a confession said the body was buried.
Only for the crucial biological trace on that very toy car to turn out not to belong to Ben. It's bewildering.
It really is. And the case becomes this incredibly stark example, doesn't it? It shows how investigators can build a really strong professional belief, the accident theory, based on compelling circumstantial evidence like the confession and the toy's location.
But still end up with ambiguous forensic details. The science doesn't quite lock it down.
Precisely. There's a gap between what they know happened, the professional belief, and what the forensic science can unequivocally prove. The how and where seem fixed for the police, but the final scientific signature is off.
It highlights that difference so clearly.
This raises an important question, something for you, the listener, to really mull over. The whole police case rests on the professional belief. Ben died in an accident with that digger, and that the dinky car was with him. So if that car was his, and it was found where they believe he was buried, but the degraded blood traces found on it weren't his, what does that tell us?
Whose blood was it? The digger driver's? Konstantinos Barkas. Did he injure himself? Did someone else handle that car after the accident but before it got buried?
Exactly. What does that tiny, non-matching forensic detail suggest about the precise sequence of events on July 24th, 1991? It's that specific detail that means even now, after all this time and investigation, the absolute truth remains, well, tragically, just out of reach.